Hello and welcome into the Take the North podcast, along with Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune. I'm Mark Grote of Chicago Sports Radio 670, The Score, and we are talking right now a day after a Bears 6-3 loss to the Seattle Seahawks for the nation to see it. If that was the choice that they made, they got to see the Bears' second 10-game losing streak in the last 3 years and a 4-12 season. And Dan, this has turned into one of the worst seasons the Chicago Bears have ever had.
Every week we get something a little bit different. And that was kind of the discussion up in the press box early in the second half was what is going to be the unique twist on this particular loss. You and I talked earlier in the week, Grote, about our homework assignment for early next week, which is to do the power rankings of the miserable, imperfect 10, as we're going to call it, the 10-game losing streak with the 10th loss coming without a touchdown on Thursday night. And as you mentioned, in front of an Amazon Prime audience that had to be riveted and glued to their seats as they watched that whole thing unfold.
There are no losses along these 10 that you can look at and just say, yeah, they played well, but they still lost. Like, they all have their own complications. They all have their own twists to them. So this is going to be, once we do that, this is going to be a difficult task. I kind of got some ideas running around for my top 5 at this point, but there's some subtle ones that we kind of put away that came, way back in October. I mean, it's crazy to think that this has been going on since London, which seems like it was about a decade ago, Dan.
Yeah, I think last night was 61 days from the Washington game, right? And so now we get to 62 days today. We're going to get up to 70 when we get to Green Bay, possibly 69 nice when we go to Lambeau Field a week from now. I don't even know if you're going to make that trip because that game doesn't mean a damn thing. And one of the conversations that we were having walking back up to the press box last night is there should be just a Week 18 opt-out clause for teams like the Bears. You find the Packers another opponent to play that's interested in playing the final game of the season, and the Bears just say, you know what, we've been through a lot. We're going to move on with our lives and we're going to get out of here. I mean, it's like when you're out with that friend at the bar where you're just like, yeah, you know what, we're going to get you the cab. You get the hell out of here. We'll catch up with you later.
Right.
And that's what the Bears need to do right now.
I don't need this. You don't need. I don't like you. You don't like me. Let's just call it right there.
I mean, man, I don't know. Some of these power rankings that we'll do on these 10 losses, Grote, will directly hinge on the way I felt walking from the press box to the post-game locker room. This has been a unique year for that. You know what I mean? In terms of the feelings you have. I'm like, are we really walking back into this Lions den again, having to unpack what is another just horrific, embarrassing humiliation that the team experienced? And man, I may take 6 hours over the weekend to write out the questions that I have for the powers that be at Haugh, because when we get our opportunity to talk to them in a week and a half, they need to be on the stand and they need to be ready to be grilled.
Well, let's get to our opening drive and get right into it here.
It's time for the opening drive.
And just picking up on where you were, Dan, with monitoring the Dan Wiederer tension level as it is respect to the Chicago Bears, of course. Yesterday, as you and I were hustling back from, I guess it was Caleb Williams who spoke last at the podium after Dan and I had been in the locker room, then to the podium, Thomas Brown speaking, and then you had Caleb Williams, and then we're walking back, and I think I said something just pretty innocuous to you, Dan, like, what'd you think about that one? You're walking fast as hell. You're shaking your head, and I think you just said, it's just a bad team. It's just a bad team that played a bad game.
It's a bad team showing you how bad they are week after week after week, showing you how bad they can be. And that's where Thursday night was something. We talked in our preview podcast that they were going to be hosting a decidedly mediocre opponent. Seahawks were every bit of mediocre when they arrived at Soldier Field on Thursday night. They crossed 2 time zones, flew on Christmas night, had to get ready on a short holiday week, and they played a middle tier game at best. Scored 6 points after an impressive opening drive, and gave you every opportunity to beat them. And you said, we don't want to beat you. You know, we're going to figure out a way late in this game to screw up a potential game-winning drive. And guess what? We're not only going to find a way, we're going to find like 7 or 8 ways, you know, and that final drive to me was mystifying because of all the things that went into it. You start your drive home and you're just going over it in your head and you're going, the Bears got the ball back with 5 minutes and 12 seconds left. They had all 3 timeouts in their back pocket. They had the 2-minute warning to help them stop the clock, and they essentially ran out of time. Now, look, the interception that ended the game came with 11 seconds left. There were still precious seconds ticking on that clock. But the fact that you could only get to the opposing 40-yard line in 5 minutes of game clock with all 3 timeouts and a 2-minute warning left left you just flabbergasted again. I mean, you go through the log, right? The inventory of that final drive.
Yeah.
And you can count a half dozen blunders that are entirely Bears oriented and so on brand for what this losing streak has been.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we could talk about some of those blunders too, because it began, or one of the glaring ones was with, I guess I'm just looking at the log here too now, Dan, 2:14 left in the game. The 4th and 1, you get the false start by Jake Curran, which set off a bunch of events. It makes it a 4th and 5. And then it looks like they're gonna punt. The special team starts to come out. Does it sound familiar at all to anybody? And then Thomas Brown decides to change his mind. They waste a timeout in the process of doing that. And thank God for them. I mean, they did convert that. But it was just messy and ugly getting to that point.
Yeah, and remember, they got to 4th and 1 because they couldn't get a first down after being 2nd and 2. You have a pass to Keenan Allen for no gain, and then Caleb Williams tries to scramble out of pressure and get stopped inches short of the line to gain, and then you're lining up for the play that you believe will be, okay, like we're just going to run God's play again, right? And get the first down, and Jake Curran jumps, and then you decide you're going to punt, and then after the game, Thomas Brown says, well, I had a change of heart, and I decided that we were going to go for it, but you waste the timeout, and then you get the warning. I mean, there's so many different things. The second timeout they use on that drive, Grote, comes after an incompletion. You know what I mean? Like, how do you have an incomplete pass and then run into trouble with the time clock? So why are you using timeouts when the clock doesn't need to be stopped, but then when the clock does need to be stopped, you're just letting it run and run and run and run. And I heard you and Studs last night on the pod talk about the play where Caleb got hit in the throat, you know, and for some reason they got that play off at 1:15. And the next snap, it's a beautiful play, right? Like he throws a bullet. It's one of the star power plays to Rome Odunze. And then it takes, more than 30 seconds before you take your next snap. What is happening? Like, how is this still an issue? What are you doing for all of those weeks in training camp? What are you doing at practice every week? How are you still incapable of managing a situation collectively? And as it relates to Caleb, and we'll get into him a little bit more as we go, but at some point, when they get to the starting gate of the 2025 season, I want him empowered to be able to take a timeout. Son, if you got hit in the throat and you're having trouble getting to the huddle to get the play call in, just turn to the official and say, timeout. Walk over to the sideline, explain to your head coach, I took the timeout because I got hit in the throat and I didn't want to waste valuable time off this clock. You can't have this twice in a season. It happened in Detroit. We let Caleb off the hook for that. But at some point, he has to be empowered to be able to make the T signal to the official and stop the clock when those things are occurring.
Yeah, I think what it all exposes, like the bigger picture, and we're gonna continue to drill down on this end of the game, but the bigger picture is it exposes or clinches, I guess, Dan, because this is not exactly breaking news. It wasn't just Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron, and maybe it started with those two guys, and maybe it was their philosophies under which these coaches learned. But seeing the same stuff from the coaching staff that is left, and there's no reason to go all in on these guys because they're just not going to be here, and they got thrust into this position. But it's the entire organization. It had, like, philosophically, wherever this all started, whatever hiring practices occurred, They got it all wrong. They got it all wrong. And we saw it on, like, everybody was, and a lot of people kind of taking joy in this for Matt Eberflus. Oh, well, Matt Eberflus must be happy now. Boy, he must be laughing right now. No, he's still deserved to be fired. All the mistakes he made are still right there for you to go back and check. And apparently he passed some of this stuff down to the coaches. So it just exposes, again, or clinches, Dan, that this whole coaching staff, quite frankly, is not good enough.
Yeah, no question. And they're all gone, and you got to find replacements. And we'll have plenty of time to unpack what that looks like. I will tell you this. I'm writing my game column late Thursday night in the Soldier Field press box, and I'm laughing out loud. And I turned to Colleen Kane and I said, this might be one of my favorite lines of the season, and mostly because of the fans that allowed it to occur. And so I'm going to read you this from my ChicagoTribune.com column. Toward the very end of Thursday's loss, the Amazon Prime cameras caught 3 Bears fans in the stands with brown paper bags over their heads, complete with marker-drawn frowns and 3 different messages of despair. I'm tired, stood next to Why Am I Here, who was beside Make It Stop. The man in the middle appropriately shot 2 middle fingers into the air. Fitting, right? I mean, like what a moment, right? Like those 3 dudes, paper bags on their head, just expressing what everyone felt. The other expression, as I heard you guys talk about late Thursday night, was the fact that the Bears are on a game-deciding drive. They're down by 3 points at home in a gotta-have-it moment, and the crowd at Soldier Field is chanting "Sell the team." Yeah. And those chants are mushroomed up right after the Thomas Brown timeout to decide to go for it after deciding to punt. And they were so loud and so, dispiriting and just like fitting, right? Again, just so fitting, because here you are trying desperately to get off this 9-game losing streak, and your fans are so fed up that they've been through years and years and years of trauma that you're shouting "Sell the team" in the middle of a possible game-winning drive.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And it was interesting too. And I guess maybe the Bears are lucky that, because the chance of "sell the team" come after the false start and all the confusion that mixes up in that. But then they convert while the chants are happening, they convert the 3rd and 15 to DJ Moore, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah." So it was almost like they were bailed out. And I was reminded of this too. I mean, we know that there was the chance at White Sox Park this summer of "Sell the team." There was also 3 years ago, the same thing happened with the Bulls and Zach Levine live on ESPN. "Sell the team, sell the team." That was during Gar Forman, John Paxson, and changes were made with both organizations. Now, I mean, that has to, when that chant happens, that has to be taken seriously. That has to go in the category of, what are the McCaskies going to do about that?
I mean, what an unbelievable scenario to be put in, right? Like, to try to figure out what you're gonna do with that big picture conundrum, And there's no easy solutions, and you got to figure out where things are going. Man, it's crazy. I don't know where you are on that, and then I want to bring you back to one hypothetical coaching wise. To come out of that last drive. But what is the solution to that? If you are George McCaskey and family trying to figure out, hey, I'm not sure if you heard last night, but they were asking us to get rid of the charter franchise. And do we want to consider this? Like, is it something you talk about on New Year's?
My response was tepid. Yeah, what are you going to do about that? Right. Because I think that there does need to be some sort of response to it. I guess where my brain went was, that's just another, like, are you going to keep Ryan Poles? Are you not going to keep Ryan Poles? That just brings his chances down a notch. And I don't know where I am. I don't know where I'm on the meter. I still think Ryan Poles is probably back. But I mean, each game that goes by, like, I'm not like married to it. Like, when they 10th straight loss, "Sell the team." You're this team that you put together scored 3 points. You're essentially embarrassed again on national TV. How can that not go in the column of, we're trying to decide whether or not we want to bring Ryan Poles back, and go in as a very negative mark that goes on his record at this moment?
When you walked into week 1, your general manager stood at the front of the room in the PNC Center at Haugh Hall and told you he never had been more in love with the depth of his offensive line than he was this year. It's another lapse in judgment that he had no idea what he was looking at. The offensive line has been a disaster. It remained a disaster on Thursday night. The head coach that he strongly backed was a disaster. The offensive coordinator that they collectively hired didn't make it to week 11. There are errors in judgment here that need to be accounted for. They need to be studied. They need to be researched by Kevin Warren, and he needs to come to answers on what they can do to change that. Does it mean going a new direction with the general manager? Does it mean allowing this general manager to clean up his own mess? The bottom line is you better acknowledge how many catastrophic errors in judgment there were. And we'll get into another one later when we get into the Caleb conversation, because I think it's significant. I did want to ask you this, because that completion to Rome Odunze pushes the ball across midfield, and the Bears have 1st and 10 at the Seattle 40. I think that comes with 37 seconds left. Is that where we're at?
Yeah.
To get that done. They decide to Rome catches that ball with like a minute 10, and then they don't get the next snap off till 37 seconds left. You've got 3 plays to get about 6 to 8 yards to get in Cairo Santos's range. And I'm wondering why they didn't have something better dialed up to at least get the field goal range before they started to get more greedy, because you have a throwaway on 1st down when you get pressured. Then you have a deep shot down the right sideline to Rome Odunze that was badly underthrown by Caleb and fell incomplete. And then ultimately another deep shot to no one in particular. It was listed in the game book as a throw to DJ Moore, but it was near no one over the middle, and Caleb airmailed it. And then finally you get the 4th down interception, which ended his streak of passes without an interception. Why are you not capable of finding something to get into field goal range there, and then trying to ante up from there and figure out, okay, can we get a little greedier from here? But that made no sense to me.
I got to tell you, my thought process was there as I'm following along with the game. You've lost 9 in a row. That there is no way that I trust that the Bears, if they had made a field goal, that if they had tied the game, they're still not going to win the game. So to me, it was, and they know this. They've lost 9 in a row in spectacular fashion, with every possible scenario going wrong. So in my head, I was totally for, let's go balls to the wall to try to get 6 out of this thing. Or, if you do get closer, find the field goal. But they wanted to, it was win the game or bust, because they don't even trust themselves at this point. And so while what you're saying, there's a lot of common sense to it, but I was like, you got to be drastic at some point within all of this. So I was, I didn't trust them, that if they tied it, that was not going to be enough. And then B, they just needed to put 6 points up on the board in this game. So I was okay with it, believe it or not.
Well, and then, by the way, on the final play, Seattle brings basically the entire team to the line of scrimmage and says, hey, guess what? We're going to rush everybody. We're going to bring 7, 8, 9, 10. We're going to decide how many we want to come chase you on this final play. And the Bears know it before the snap. They know that they're overloaded to the right side, Cole Kmet's side on the end of that formation. And I asked Caleb after the game, hey, what's your answer there when they're coming all out blitz there? And he essentially said, look, I've got to account for the free rusher coming off the front side. And then I'm trying to get DJ on a runway. We're trying to get DJ running fast, knowing that he's going to have a one-on-one opportunity. And I'm basically just trying to throw it deep. Well, Caleb doesn't buy himself enough space with his back pedal, gets hit. I think it was Julian Love that put the hit on him, or maybe it was Kobe Bryant. They were both there. I think Kobe Bryant may have been the one that hit his arm. And the ball just flutters, and it's an interception, and the game's over, and the losing streak hits 10, and everything is sideways once again. But it's just, it was like you had it all. You had it all in there. Oh, by the way, Caleb fumbled the snap on that final drive as well, and took one of his 7 sacks because he couldn't handle a shotgun snap from Coleman Shelton that was certainly good enough to be able to catch. You had it all. Sacks, clock management, fumbled passes, the whole thing. Sideways.
It was all right there for you, and our friends in the rest of the country as well. We're cooking on Caleb Williams right now. Why don't we make it official and do our Caleb Williams segment right here on Take the North? All right, Caleb Williams, 16 of 28, 122 yards. Did not throw a touchdown. He did have his first pick in a long time. The usual issues, Dan, to begin the game. 3 straight 3rd and 5 opportunities to begin the game. You had help along the way, though, or lack of help. A legit Keenan Allen drop. So much for me building the case to bring him next year when he does that right in front of me, man. And then the 2 misses to Roma Dunze. I don't know, and I'm done, Dan, trying to figure out why and there's so much more to Caleb's game, but why they struggle early on in these games. And it's a lot of Caleb. It's a lot of Caleb. And I know he didn't have any help with Keenan there, but at some point in time, you have to say that the common denominator is the guy throwing the football.
You and I got what we wanted out of Thursday's game, and from the standpoint of it was close, wire to wire, right? Like we asked for the Bears to be in a close game, to have the ball late in the game where the fourth quarter drives meant something. And the result was still the same. And Caleb got sacked 7 more times. And I went back through all 7 of them on Friday morning, Grote, and you can find Caleb at fault partially in 5 of the 7 sacks. That's not to take the offensive line fully off the hook. I mean, the offensive line had an awful night. Protection has been an issue all year. There's still too many moments where guys don't know who they're supposed to block and then don't block that guy well enough, regardless of who they're supposed to block. But yeah, Caleb ran out of bounds, scrambled out of bounds for no gain for a sack. He had moments within there where, he just holding on to the ball. They get the ball back before halftime and it looks like they're going to maybe at least try to get toward Hail Mary range, to end the first half. And then the last play of the first half is Caleb just holding the ball. And eventually the pocket collapses in on him and he takes a sack. And there were just moments throughout the night where even when the pressure comes, you need to know where your answers are. You need to know when the ball needs to come out and where it needs to go. I just don't want this conversation to get so volatile, like all the Justin Fields conversations got. Like Caleb Williams still has a bright future. Caleb Williams deserves a chance to reboot with a new coaching staff and people that are going to put pieces around him to help his chances of succeeding. But that doesn't mean Caleb Williams is made of Teflon and he's not ever at fault. And I feel like we're already in the social media sphere falling into this crazy world where if you say anything that's critical of Caleb Williams, here comes the avalanche of backlash from people that can't take it. Like they can't take the criticism. And like Thursday night's game was horrible. You read off the stats. The one stat that we have to kind of backpedal a little bit is the passing yards, 76 net passing yards because of all the sack yardage. Yeah. When it's first down and you take a loss of 14, granted, there's free runners coming at you, but you see those free runners coming at you the minute you take the snap. You got to figure out a way to not make that be a 14-yard loss. You have to, because now it's 2nd and 24 and the series is over. The series is over. And I would like to go back maybe with this longer break here and just see, like, on all the possessions that Caleb Williams has been sacked this season, how many have they eventually scored on? You know what I mean? And I bet those percentages will be pretty alarming because they truly are drive killers and game killers. And he's accountable for some of that. And it's not crazy to say that out loud. And I hope they're saying it out loud inside the building.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm over it. Like, if Caleb Williams has a bad game, I don't care what people say. I mean, if you didn't watch last night's game and think that he didn't struggle, then you don't have football aptitude at all. I mean, you got to call it like it's fair. But then you have the Justin Fields people too, who are going to be like, oh, you're not criticizing Caleb enough. Look, as you said, Caleb Williams should get the benefit of the doubt going into next season for sure. The same way Justin Fields did, the same way Mitch Trubisky did. Right. We weren't on Justin Fields until year 3, probably, or
end of year 2, probably.
End of year 2, yeah. But I'm talking about coming into the year training camp. It was brand new, fresh light for Justin Fields. Optimism abounded. People were projecting him as still became maybe he's Josh Allen and all. Like, we came up with every possible way to sort of rationalize why Justin Fields was still going to be good. And that's the right thing to do. You get more than 1 year to try to figure it out, even though we all, and I'm guilty of it, I've talked about it before, Dan, we all wanted it fast. And we wanted Caleb Williams so badly to be the exception to the rule. And the rule is rookie quarterbacks struggle.
Rookie quarterbacks struggle, and rookie quarterbacks have to find answers. So I want to get to something in a minute here that new offensive coordinator Chris Beatty had to say on Christmas Eve. Kind of flew under the radar because it was Christmas Eve. It wasn't a traditional week out at Haugh Hall, but I think there's some things to unpack there. I do want to say this, that with Caleb, for me, on the top of his offseason checklist, I want him to improve his awareness for reasons we just talked about. You need to know situations. You need to know things that are happening on the fly within a play that create moments for you to use instincts and awareness to put your team in an optimal situation. I would like to see the fundamentals improve a little bit. As good as he is with some of the off-platform throws and the on-the-move stuff, there are other times where you're like, man, just stick that back foot in the ground and make a throw. You know what I mean? Like you're missing the guy by 3 yards because your mechanics and your fundamentals are off, and like that can't happen. And then the vertical passing attack, that was very clear on Thursday night that was a problem. I think the next gen stats numbers, Grote had him at 1 for 9 for 15 yards on passes that traveled more than 10 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. Yeah. That can't happen. That's got to get better in a hurry.
Yeah. I mean, there were, so you mentioned the drive before the half in the second quarter, once they finally started to get things going. There were some nice moments happening, but those were playmaker plays. Second quarter, the 3rd and 7 conversion to DeAndre Swift for 24 yards, which I loved. I love that play. I love that because that play worked so many times against the Bears. It was good to see that. The 3rd and 9 conversion to DJ Moore for 18 yards, the one in the second quarter. And then the play that I loved, that I thought might revive the game, quite honestly, was the bad snap from Coleman Shelton. Caleb able to gather himself and then find Keenan Allen for 16 yards. But as you pointed out, that drive ends in a field goal. Ultimately, some nice plays on it, but ends very disappointingly with just the 3 points.
Don't also forget about the touchdown pass that got overturned by the Jake Curry
to
holding
Rome
penalty. I mean, like that's the play that you play on a loop when you're trying to get sleep at night. If you're somebody that works inside Alice Hall, because you go, holy cow, like this dude moving to his left outside the pocket with a, sidearm arm slot, basically throws a fastball into the very back of the end zone on target to Rome Odunze for what would have been a, hey, play this on a loop all week viral highlight for Caleb Williams if it didn't come off the board because of a holding penalty. And those are the moments where you go, yeah, man, like this dude's got stuff that you'll never be able to teach. Now you've got to refine the stuff that you do need to teach. Part of the refining process comes in the quarterback's own ownership of who he wants to be and how he's going to go about it. That leads me to the Chris Beatty audio from Tuesday. We're going to listen to an initial question to Chris Beatty about how Caleb's handled the ups and downs, and you're going to hear him drop some subtext and some notes in there, and then there's a follow-up question and another question, and Chris Beatty gives us some stuff to unpack here, so let's let him have the floor right now.
I think he's done a solid job. I think that's hard. Like I said, there's a lot about this league that's hard. I guess that's kind of a theme every week, because there's so much to learn, and he's learning every week, and you can see that. You can hear it talking to him, seeing pictures and seeing things like that, from defensive changes and things of that nature. He's gotten better every week. There's still a lot of growth to be made, but, like I said, that's all quarterbacks in that position. But I do think he's eager to learn and learning how to learn. I think that's a lot of it too. And that's what sometimes people understate when you're talking about the learning curve for younger quarterbacks, is learning how to be a quarterback, learning how to study, learning how to prepare for the game. Those are then what's your rhythm as opposed to what somebody else's rhythm is. We can all look at it and say, oh, this veteran did it this way. He's got to figure out what is his way.
Can you expand a little bit on that, on what the keys are into finding your particular rhythm of preparation and what really needs to come out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a daily rhythm as far as, okay, what time do I get to the facility? What am I trying to do when I get there? If it's a Monday, what am I doing? If it's Wednesday, what am I doing prior to normal downs? If it's Thursday on third down? Those things are all, how do you get, prepared for those things? And then it's the overall, okay, how do I practice getting these calls and spitting them out in a huddle? Whether am I going to record it? Am I going to say it to my girlfriend or whoever, my parents, whoever it is that I talk to? How do I practice spitting out these calls? Because it's a lot different than reading them off a board, like in college, or getting signals and never having to speak to the whole offense. It's different when you're a 21, 22-year-old young man sitting in the huddle and there's 32-year-old people sitting back looking at you, so there's a way to learn how you do that and go through your process as well.
He was paired with a second-year quarterback in this quarterback room. I imagine Tyson probably, isn't as set in his ways as maybe a 5-year, 10-year vet would be. Is that hard? He didn't necessarily have somebody to mimic in terms of that weekly routine, or a veteran to mimic, I guess.
Tice is really a lot further along than you would think. He's a really sharp kid. So, but I do think there is something to be said for, having somebody to pattern yourself after and just to be able to throw things off of. Rip did that early when he was here, and Tice has done a nice job of helping him. And, but I think at the same time, that's part of figuring out what you do best. And I think that's what he's trying to figure out is, how do I go through my process best, and what type of things do I do in that process? Because everybody's process is not the same.
Grote, Chris Beatty, pardon the expression, microed the shit out of that for us. I'm curious what you made of all that, because there was some meat on that.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting when he's talking about, because it's very easy I'll just use me as a reporter to overlook things like how the learning process actually takes place. Like, I just assume Caleb Williams is going to come here, he's going to learn. He's a smart kid. We know he's a gregarious personality. He sounds good when he talks to us, but every single day he is not only learning, and it's good that he's eager to learn, but he's also learning how to learn, which I loved. I love that. That is so smart from Chris. Everybody can take that lesson. There are things that all of us need to learn how to learn, and that's what this guy is going through, no matter how polished he sounds, because we see the breakdown between the way he sounds and the way he plays and the way the games go. So I thought it was really important to hear that, and that I hope whoever is around him in the future, and not necessarily ruling out Chris Beatty, I hope that they realize that and take his learning and take it to the next step.
They talk about learning how to learn there. And then Chris Beatty follows it up and says it's about learning how to be a quarterback in this league. It's about learning how to study, learning how to prepare. These are a big deal when it comes to success in the NFL. Caleb's eagerness to learn is an undeniable strength, and it's something he's going to have to tap into for the duration of his career. The ownership piece of the puzzle of understanding how much heavy lifting is involved in that is something that I hope he goes into this offseason and reflects upon. Yeah. I really do, because there's a lot to this. If there's one positive to the 2024 season, is that Caleb Williams has gotten a really up close look at the degree of difficulty of succeeding in this league and how absolutely dispiriting it can be when you struggle and when you fail. Now you have to figure out what to do with that. This traces me back a little bit also to another miscalculation by Ryan Poles, who thought that his roster didn't need to spend resources on bringing in an established veteran quarterback to be kind of that cookie cutter mentor for Caleb Williams, and being able to say, hey, listen, this may not work for you here, but let me give you 5 or 6 things that I like to do in my preparation habits. You heard Chris Beatty there say, hey, Brett Rippon was doing that for him during the preseason. Mm-hmm. Well, then Brett Rippon got an opportunity to go get on an active roster somewhere, and he said, peace out. I don't really need to be a caddy for Caleb Williams when I get a chance to go make a bigger paycheck and be on a 53-man roster somewhere. And you were left with a QB room of Caleb Williams, Tyson Bagent, and Austin Reed. Was that an ideal infrastructure for a quarterback like this? I don't know. You can look back on it in retrospect and say, obviously not. But when it comes back to this component of learning how to be a quarterback, taking ownership of that, that's something I think Caleb's really going to have to come face to face with here in the offseason of 2025, and understand that as ambitious as his biggest goals are, that there is a level of psychotic preparation that needs to go into even scratching the surface of getting near the staircase that leads to the escalator that goes to the elevator to get to the levels he wants to go to.
Yeah, and his predecessors had those guys, those veteran quarterbacks in the room. Chase Daniels
didn't always work out. Yeah, but
it didn't always work out. No, but it didn't, obviously. But what a comfort that had to be for Mitch Trubisky and Andy Dalton, Nick Foles for Justin Fields. And right, I mean, Tyson Bagent got his own thing going on, man. He's trying to learn, and he still has big plans in the NFL. So there's competition between those two guys, and we know who's winning the competition. But that's the way Tyson Bagent probably sees it.
So, it's amazing. And like that was one of those pieces of audio. You're in a hurry on Christmas Eve. You're looking to close up the laptop and get home to the family party that you're hosting. Right. And so you're like, holy crap, Chris Beatty said a lot there. And I didn't want it to fall through the cracks because we've got an opportunity now this coming week to talk to Kerry Joseph. And nobody in the building that is still in the building has spent more time with Caleb Williams over the last 8 months than Kerry Joseph has. And we'll get our last opportunity, I believe, on Thursday to kind of get the exit interview, as it may be, with Kerry Joseph for 8 minutes, right? In that midway, you know what the scene's going to be. I think there's a lot to dig in on, particularly on this topic with how Caleb Williams gets himself to the springboard for his year 2 growth.
The last time I talked to him, that all of us were out there talking to him in the midway, Joseph, it was when it was just sort of the beginning part of why is Caleb Williams in this offense struggle early in the game. This may have been like a couple of months ago, because I'm not able to make all of those little tea parties that go on. And it's a fun little drill that we go through. But I was gonna say, I asked him about like what's going on with Caleb early in the game. Is he nervous? Is he like, what is he too amped up? And he just kind of looked I think you were there for it. He kind of looked at me and said, he is a rookie. He's a rookie. That's what's going on. I wonder if that'll change. Some of that is true, but that was weeks ago. So I do wonder what the evolution of that is, or maybe that's still the answer as far as he's concerned.
And it's such a critical evolution. And then you look at it through the lens of, look, like they're going to pair him with a new head coach, and they're going to pair him with a new offensive coordinator, and they're going to pair him with a new quarterbacks coach, and they're going to pair him presumably with another quarterback in the room, whether Tyson sticks around or not. You'd think they would add somebody else to that room. Well, figure out how to tap into those people, figure out a way for those people to tap into you, and so that you can find your way to brighter days. Because these days that we're living right now, oh brother, they're only going to get worse if we're at December 27th of 2025 and there has been no discernible breakthrough, right? Like significant breakthrough that a number 1 overall pick should have. Look, like, please don't misinterpret this, audience. Like, nobody is sounding any crazy alarm bells on Caleb Williams. This is more a recognition and a vocal acknowledgement of how steep this mountain is to climb, and how Caleb needs to understand the steepness of this mountain, and he needs to invest himself accordingly with all the things that Chris Beatty talked about: learning how to be a quarterback, learning how to study, learning how to prepare, learning how to learn and foster your own growth. And we'll see which direction Caleb takes us.
Right. So much of that is, quite frankly, and this is oversimplifying, it's easy for guys like that at lower levels. Obviously, from Pop Warner to high school to college, like a lot of that is easy, and he's seeing things for the first time. So I agree with all of that. There is some positive we can find, and it is in our 2-minute drill.
The 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill.
The Bears only gave up 6 points last night. The defense was good last night. I mean, you had that Kyler Gordon play, the strip, and is it a touchdown? Is it not? Darrell Taylor had a strip sack last night. Cowart had a sack. Sweat had a sack. So it on the overall, it's been a while, Dan, since we could say that the defense looked pretty good.
Well, the Sweat sack, if you recall, was on what I was referring to as Stumblebum 2 Electric Boogaloo, which was when Geno Smith fell down in the backfield taking the snap.
Touch him. And
Montez got the little Brett Favre, Michael Strahan treatment on that one. I do want to talk to you for about 17 seconds on the Kyler Gordon touchdown return, because that was one of the weirder plays in NFL history. No official followed Kyler Gordon down the field. Kyler Gordon basically stopped. Tyler Lockett was running with him. He stopped. Then Kyler Gordon's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to jog gently into the north end zone and see if this holds up. He eventually gets there. Everyone's like, that wasn't a touchdown. That wasn't a touchdown. And then they come over the mic and they go, nobody said anything, so it's a touchdown. You're like, what? Obviously it got overturned, but what a weird sequence that thing was.
Oh, it was. I meant to mention this today, but it's perfect for the podcast. That got a reaction in the press box that I have not heard all year. So people could have had their credentials pulled, man. No cheering. Well, there wasn't cheering. It was just an when the ref got on the mic and called it a touchdown, the audible like whoa in that press box, man. It was wild.
It's just like, what was that, right? Like, I think that was
Yes.
the key thing was what the heck was that?
Yeah. I don't know how to put an evaluation on that Tremaine Edmonds near pick because my want is to say you should have made the play.
No doubt.
You got to make plays, man. But he made a play, but you really need to make a play there. He's just been such a disappointment this year, but I guess we put that down as a play.
Yeah, I mean, look, like the Bears defense have been getting crushed in recent weeks, giving up 30 plus regularly, and they held the Seahawks to 6 points, and they held Jackson Smith and Jigba down, and they didn't let DK Metcalf break the game open. And after an opening drive where they were very susceptible against the run, they did it well enough the rest of the way. And so that was an encouraging sign of life from that side of the ball. Much harder test in Week 18 in Green Bay. We'll see if they can come anywhere near passing that. But at a minimum, I thought, and Thomas Brown reflected on it after the game, 2 of the 3 phases played pretty well and played winning level football on Thursday night. Offense just didn't keep up.
I don't think you and I have talked about Pete Carroll. I don't think we have. What do you
not.
think about that rumor? The 74-year-old Pete Carroll supposedly showing interest in the Chicago Bears job.
Call him. Lean in, listen to what he has to say, have conversations. There's zero reason for this franchise in the state that they're in to be picky, to turn their nose up at a guy that went to the playoffs 10 times, that averaged 10 victories per season in Seattle. I understand the fear. He's too old, right? He's defensive minded. He's going to want too much control of the roster. I understand why people would be a little bit averse to that. You are the Chicago Bears. You are losing 10 plus games every damn year. You don't have an opportunity to go, we're not so sure. You have the conversation. You can have your sights set on Ben Johnson as your top target. You can have Mike Vrabel and Cliff Kingsbury and Todd Monken and Joe Brady and everybody else that you have on your list. They can still be on the list. But why, particularly now where Pete Carroll's unemployed and you've got opportunities to at least facilitate a conversation, would you turn your nose up at that? I would explore it to the fullest extent.
Yeah, and you can gauge it too. If it sounds like he's lost a step, or if he's aging, or whatever, like he's not as coherent as he used to be. Okay, but that's what you learn in an interview. And I'll remind people too that Pete Carroll his hands were in. He rebuilt that Seattle team. He had general manager power. And I know that's another whole conversation because of Ryan Poles, but he came in there and tore that thing down. I remember he came in and he waived 20 players, got them to the playoffs at 7-9 against the Bears, right?
Yeah.
The Bears won a playoff game against a 7-9 team, and then eventually they go to 2 Super Bowls and win one of them. One really bad play call that he allowed, I suppose. But other than that, he's a very successful college and pro head coach, except for the Jets.
Never won fewer than 7 games in Seattle. 14 seasons, never won fewer than 7 games. Do you know what the people of Chicago would do right now for a 7-win season? I mean,
7-win season.
I mean, think about that, right? Think about
what
that win season would feel like. We've talked about it. We've talked about the misery of pulling into that parking lot in Lake Forest and walking into that building being like, oh God, it's 4-12 now. Oh God. would be an incredible change.
Studs tells our producer Adam Stasinski, writing up on the chat, they won 7 games last year and it felt great.
Right? Yeah, think about that. You know, I mean, exactly. And so, who
knew what we had last year? I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, they were lighting up cigars on New Year's Eve in Week 17 last year, and it was a festive party inside the Bears locker room. Last night, you walked in and you were like, "Man, we're closing the doors on Soldier Field tonight," and this place is agitated.
Oh man. Hey, couple other absences from last night that I wanted to discuss with you and get your opinion on. Tevin Jenkins injured and out. He didn't play last night. And then Zach Pickens, a healthy scratch last night. Dan, tackle both of those.
Well, we'll start with Tevin Jenkins. I believe tweeted this out before the game on Thursday. I think it's his 22nd missed game in 4 years. I think he also has 16 other games that he didn't play 75% or more of the snaps in. That's a lot of missed time, Grote, for a position that you need to stabilize. And so it's unfortunate, like Tevin, when playing at full strength and full health, can be a really good football player. He's not on the field nearly enough. Zach Pickens has been here now for a couple of years and made almost no impact. And that's where this program is so far behind schedule, because you have too many picks like this, day 2 picks that not only don't meet expectations, but don't give you anything, right? Like Zach Pickens has given them next to nothing. Velus Jones gave them next to nothing. Tyler Scott made a couple plays Thursday night, but he's been non-existent, right? Like that's a 4th round draft pick that has given you almost nothing in 2 years. And so you can't keep having those kinds of misses if you expect to close ground on the Packers and the Vikings and the Lions in a division that ain't going anywhere anytime soon. That's what I would say about those two. And man, they need new answers.
We have gone well over 2 minutes in our 2-minute drill, Dan. So I will just say, is there anything else that you need to tell us here on this episode before we wrap it up? And I have a cat that needs my attention as well.
Yeah, we saw Tyreek Stevenson play 100% of the snaps on defense. The rotation with Terrell Smith out the window. Brad Biggs had some information on that. One other nugget, I'll just tell people to go to my Twitter account and look at the 3-word reviews from Thursday night's game. People come out, they show up. Those are really fun. I actually got a message from a fellow reporter, Joe Person, good friend of the podcast here in Carolina, who said he was driving with his son for a couple hours today, and he was just having his son read the Bears Seahawks 3-word reviews, and he was laughing out loud, and he says he's going to steal that for his own shtick in Carolina. So
I think that's cool.
A shout out to our audience, right?
Yeah.
They do a great job.
Yes. Unfortunately, the 3 words are a little bit devastating right now.
Go feed that cat, brother.
Yeah, I got to take care of the cat. For Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune, for Dave the cat, for Adam Stadzinski, our executive producer and producer of the Bernstein and Harris Show on The Score. I am Mark Grote. Thank you all so much for listening to and watching the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.